March 9, 1974. Lubang Island, Philippines. The rifle sight aligned perfectly on the Filipino farmer walking through the jungle clearing. My finger rested on the trigger. 30 years of training, 30 years of discipline, 30 years of following orders told me to fire. The war had been over for 29 years. I didn't know that. Or rather, I refused to believe it. I was Second Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda, Imperial Japanese Army intelligence officer. My orders were clear: conduct guerrilla operations on Lubang Island until the Imperial Army returned. Never surrender. Never give up. I had followed those orders for 10,585 days, but before I tell you how a Japanese soldier fought World War II for 3 decades after everyone else stopped, how I killed 30 people in a war that had already ended, and how my refusal to surrender became both the most loyal and most tragic story of the Pacific War, hit that subscribe button right now. What you're about to hear will change everything you think you know about duty, loyalty, and the impossible burden of following orders that should never have been given. The farmer disappeared into the trees. I lowered my rifle, not because I believed the war was over, I didn't, but because tactical discipline required confirming targets before engagement. I was the last Japanese soldier fighting World War II, and I had no idea how to stop. Part 1. The Mission That Never Ended, December 26, 1944. I was 22 years old when Major Yoshimi Taniguchi gave me my orders in a nondescript office in Tokyo. Lieutenant Onoda, you're being assigned to Lubang Island in the Philippines. Your mission is intelligence gathering and guerrilla warfare. You will harass Allied operations, gather information, and prepare for the return of the Imperial Army. Yes, sir. What are my operational parameters? You are forbidden to die by your own hand. You are forbidden to surrender. You will continue operations until relieved by a superior officer or until the Imperial Army reclaims the Philippines. Understood, sir. Onoda. He looked at me with an intensity I'd never seen before. This will be difficult. You may be isolated for weeks, possibly months. The situation in the Philippines is deteriorating, but you must persist. The Emperor depends on soldiers like you. Weeks, possibly months. It would be 29 years. I arrived on Lubang Island on December 30th, 1944 with 3 other soldiers, Private Yuichi Akatsu, Corporal Shoichi Shimada, and Private First Class Kinshichi Kozuka. We were an intelligence and guerrilla unit, trained in survival, reconnaissance, and asymmetric warfare. The tactical situation was clear. American forces were retaking the Philippines. Japanese forces were in retreat. Our mission was to slow the Allied advance through harassment operations while waiting for the inevitable Japanese counteroffensive that would reclaim the islands. That counteroffensive never came. By March 1945, American forces had secured Lubang. They distributed leaflets saying the war was ending, that Japanese forces should surrender. We burned the leaflets, obviously propaganda. The Imperial Army would never surrender. August 15, 1945. We heard aircraft overhead dropping more leaflets. These claimed the Emperor had surrendered, that Japan had capitulated after atomic bombs destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Obvious forgeries. The most transparent American psychological operation we'd encountered. The Emperor would never surrender. The concept was literally unthinkable. Our entire military culture, our understanding of Bushido and loyalty, our training and indoctrination, everything made Japanese surrender impossible to conceive. So we didn't conceive it. We assumed the leaflets were lies and continued our mission. Part 2. The Deserter's Truth, September 1949. Private Akatsu left our camp one night. Just disappeared. We assumed he'd been captured or killed. 3 months later, Filipino search parties came looking for us, calling out in Japanese that Akatsu had surrendered, that the war was over, that we should come out peacefully. We knew it was a trap. Obviously, the Filipinos had captured Akatsu and were using him to lure us out. Standard counterinsurgency tactics, but something Kozuka said bothered me. What if it's true? What if the war really ended in 1945? Impossible, I said. Japan would never surrender. The leaflets are forgeries. The radio broadcasts are propaganda. Akatsu's surrender just proves he was weak. We continue the mission. But sir, it's been 4 years. If the Imperial Army was coming back, wouldn't they be here by now? Tactical situations change. Perhaps they're prioritizing the defense of the homeland. Perhaps they're rebuilding before launching counter-offensives. Our orders haven't changed. We continue until relieved. The logic seemed sound. But doubt had entered our minds. And doubt is poison to military discipline. October 1950. Search parties came again, this time with family members. We heard my brother's voice calling out, telling me the war was over, begging me to come home. I wanted to believe it. God, how I wanted to believe it. But intelligence training had taught me to be suspicious of everything. What if this was an elaborate trick? What if they'd captured my brother, forced him to read a script? The American intelligence services were sophisticated. This could be a complex psychological operation designed to neutralize the last Japanese resistance in the Philippines. Better to be overly cautious than to fall for enemy deception. We stayed hidden. Part 3. The first death, May 7th, 1954. Corporal Shimada and I were conducting a reconnaissance patrol near a Filipino village. We'd been surviving on bananas, coconuts, and occasional raids on farms for rice. 9 years of jungle warfare had made us experts in survival. A Filipino patrol spotted us. Shimada and I separated to evade. I heard gunfire. When I reached our rally point 3 hours later, Shimada wasn't there. I waited 2 days. He never came. I searched the area carefully, found evidence of a firefight, blood on the leaves, shell casings, but no body. Either Shimada had been captured or killed, and the Filipinos had taken his remains. Now there were 2, Kozuka and me. Sir, Kozuka said when I returned to camp, Shimada's dead. Akatsu surrendered. We're the only ones left. Maybe it's time to reconsider. Reconsider what? Whether the war is really still happening. I wanted to hit him. Wanted to scream about duty and honor and following orders. But I also understood. Isolation does things to your mind. Makes you doubt. Makes you question. Kozuka, we have our orders. We continue until relieved. That's not negotiable. If you want to desert like Akatsu, I won't stop you. But I will continue my mission. He didn't desert. Whether from loyalty, fear, or simply because we'd been together so long we couldn't imagine separation, he stayed. We continued fighting a war that had ended 9 years earlier. Part 4. The evidence. We ignored over the years. We encountered increasing evidence that the war had ended. 1952. Found a Japanese newspaper dated 1950 in a village we raided. It described post-war Japan, economic reconstruction, American occupation ending. We assumed it was sophisticated propaganda created by American intelligence. 59. Discovered transistor radios in Filipino homes, technology that hadn't existed during the war. Assumed they were American imports, proof of technological advancement during continued global conflict. 65. Saw commercial aircraft overhead with markings we didn't recognize. Boeing 707s, though we didn't know the designation. Assumed they were military transports, evidence that the war had expanded and modernized. 72. Found magazines showing Tokyo rebuilt, modern cars, electronics, fashion that looked nothing like wartime Japan. Assumed they were elaborate forgeries designed to demoralize us. The evidence accumulated. Each piece, considered individually, could be explained away as propaganda or forgery. But taken together, they formed an overwhelming case that the world had moved on without us. We chose not to see it, because seeing it would mean admitting we'd wasted decades, would mean our suffering had been pointless, would mean Shimada died for nothing, so we maintained the fiction. We continued operations. We raided farms for food, burned rice stores to deny resources to the enemy, and occasionally exchanged gunfire with Filipino police, who we believed were enemy combatants. In 1972, Kazuka was killed during one of these raids, shot by Filipino police while we were burning rice paddies. I was alone, one soldier, one rifle, one mission, and no one left to share the burden of doubt with. Part 5. The tourist who found me February 20th, 1974. I encountered a Japanese tourist hiking in the Lubang jungle. This happened occasionally. Japanese tourists visited Lubang, often specifically looking for me. I'd become something of a legend. The Japanese soldier who won't surrender. Television crews, journalists, adventurers, they all came looking. I always hid. Assumed they were intelligence operatives trying to locate me. But this tourist was different. He was young, maybe 24, carrying a backpack and camera. No weapons, no military bearing. He seemed genuinely surprised when he stumbled into my camp. "Onoda-san," he said in Japanese. "Is that really you?" I had my rifle aimed at him. "Who are you? How do you know my name?" "My name is Norio Suzuki. I'm a student from Japan. I've been searching for you. I came to Lubang specifically to find you and convince you to come home. This is a trick. It's not a trick. The war ended in 1945. Japan lost. We surrendered. It's 1974 now. You've been fighting alone for almost 30 years. I'd heard this before, but something about Suzuki was different. He wasn't afraid, wasn't reading from a script. He spoke with casual familiarity about Japan, about current events, about a world that had continued without me. "Prove it," I said. He showed me his passport, issued by the Japanese government in 1973. Showed me Japanese currency, yen notes with designs I'd never seen. Showed me photographs of Tokyo, gleaming skyscrapers, modern cars, prosperity that seemed impossible for a defeated nation. "Onoda-san, Japan lost the war, but we rebuilt. We're one of the richest countries in the world now. Everyone knows your story. You're famous. Your family is alive and waiting for you to come home." I wanted to believe him, desperately wanted to believe him. But 30 years of discipline, 30 years of suspicion, 30 years of following orders. I couldn't just abandon that. "I appreciate what you're trying to do," I said, "but I have my orders. I cannot surrender without orders from a superior officer. That's non-negotiable." Suzuki thought for a moment. "What if I could bring your commanding officer? What if Major Taniguchi came here and relieved you of duty? Would you accept that?" "Major Taniguchi is probably dead. The war has been ongoing for 30 years. He's alive. Living in Tokyo. I can find him. I can bring him here. Will you wait for me?" It was the most absurd proposal I'd heard in 3 decades. But it was also the first proposal that respected my orders, my duty, my need for legitimate relief from command. "I'll wait. But if this is a trick, if you're trying to locate me for capture, you won't find me again. It's not a trick. I'll be back with your commanding officer." I promise. He left. I watched him go, half convinced I'd never see him again. Part 6. The orders that set me free. March 9th, 1974. Suzuki returned. He brought Major Taniguchi. I almost didn't believe it. The man I saw was 72 years old, gray-haired, wearing civilian clothes. But it was him. Same face, age 30 years. Same voice, same bearing. "Lieutenant Onoda," he said formally. "I am Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, your commanding officer. I'm here to relieve you of your duties, I saluted. After 30 years, finally, someone with the authority to end this. Sir, I await your orders. He pulled out a document. Formal orders. Written in proper military format. Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda, Imperial Japanese Army Intelligence Section, Headquarters 14th Area Army. Your orders to conduct guerrilla warfare operations on Lubang Island are hereby rescinded. You are relieved of duty effective immediately. You are ordered to cease all combat operations and cooperate with Philippine authorities for repatriation to Japan. Signed, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, Imperial Japanese Army, retired. He handed me the document. I read it 3 times. The format was correct. The language was proper. The signature was authentic. Sir, I have questions about the tactical situation. The war ended August 15th, 1945, Onoda. Japan surrendered. The Emperor himself ordered it. We lost. It's over. You can stop fighting now. 30 years of military discipline. 30 years of following orders. 30 years of refusing to surrender, and in one moment it all ended. I handed him my rifle, an Arisaka Type 99 that I'd maintained meticulously for 3 decades. Handed him my ammunition, my sword, my uniform. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. I killed 30 people carrying out my orders. Filipinos who were just trying to live their lives in peacetime. I burned farms, destroyed property, caused suffering, all because I refused to believe the war was over. How do I live with that? Taniguchi looked at me with something like pity. You followed orders, Onoda. You did what you believed was your duty. The blame lies with those of us who gave you those orders, who created a system where loyalty meant fighting long past reason. You're not a war criminal. You're a casualty of loyalty. Part 7. The return, they flew me to Manila, then to Tokyo. The Japan I returned to in March 1974 bore no resemblance to the Japan I'd left in 1944. Tokyo was a modern metropolis. Skyscrapers, neon signs, cars everywhere. People dressed in Western clothes, speaking casually about America as an ally rather than an enemy. The poverty and militarism I remembered had been replaced by prosperity and democracy. I was greeted as a hero. Crowds at the airport, media everywhere. The government presented me with medals. My family, parents, siblings I hadn't seen in 30 years embraced me with tears. But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a relic, a man out of time, a soldier who'd fought for 3 decades after everyone else had moved on. The Japanese government negotiated with Philippine authorities for my immunity. The Filipinos, remarkably gracious, agreed not to prosecute me for the 30 deaths. They understood I genuinely believed I was following orders, fighting a war I thought was still happening. But forgiveness didn't erase guilt. Part 8. The Impossible Adjustment. Adjusting to 1974. Japan was impossible. Everything had changed. The language had changed. New words, American loanwords, slang I didn't understand. Technology had exploded. Televisions, computers, commercial jets, medical advances. Social norms were unrecognizable. Women working, democracy, casual attitudes toward the emperor. I was 32 when I left Japan. I was 52 when I returned. I'd missed my entire adult life. Missed marriages, children, careers. Missed Japan's transformation from militarist empire to economic powerhouse. Everyone wanted to interview me, wanted to understand how I'd survived, what I'd been thinking, why I'd refused to believe the war was over. I tried to explain, in the jungle, time stops. You don't experience decades passing. You experience each day as identical to the last. Wake up, search for food, conduct reconnaissance. Maintain equipment, sleep, repeat. When every day is the same, you don't notice years passing. You're just following orders, same as yesterday, same as tomorrow. But the evidence, journalists would say, the newspapers, the radios, the leaflets, how did you ignore all that? When you're trained to suspect propaganda, everything becomes suspect. Each piece of evidence considered alone could be explained as deception. You never see the full picture. You only see individual pieces, each one potentially false. Do you regret it? That question haunted me. Did I regret 30 years of loyalty? 30 years of discipline? 30 years of following orders? I regret the people I killed. They were innocents, but I can't regret following my orders. That's what soldiers do. The failure wasn't mine. It was the system that gave orders without expiration dates, that trained loyalty without wisdom, that valued obedience over judgment. Part 9. The numbers my 30-year war can be quantified. Time in jungle, 10,585 days. December 30th, 1944, March 9th, 1974. Confirmed kills, 30 Philippine civilians and police. Wounded, approximately 100 more farms burned, 47 documented incidents. Rice paddies destroyed, estimated 250 acres. Property damage, approximately 8,1974 yen. Surrender leaflets dropped. Over 10,000 throughout the years. Search parties sent, approximately 50 separate operations. Family members brought to island. 3 occasions, 1950, 1959 to 1965. Companions Private Akatsu surrendered, September 1949. 4 years. 9 months. Corporal Shimada, killed, May 1954, 9 years. 5 months. Private Kozuka, killed, October 1972, 27 years. 10 months. Onoda surrendered March 1974, 29 years. 2 months. Survival statistics. Weight upon surrender, 52 kilograms, down from 65 kilograms in 1944. Rifle ammunition remaining, 500 rounds, had conserved meticulously. Uniform condition, original 1944 uniform. Repaired countless times. Health malnourished but no major diseases. Dental health, lost 6 teeth. No dental care for 30 years, post-surrender media. Interviews given, over 200 in first year. Books written, 2 autobiographies, documentary films, 15 plus. Speaking engagements, hundreds over subsequent decades. Part 10. The Guilt I Carry. In 1975, I traveled back to Lubang Island. Met with families of people I'd killed. There was Mr. Santos, whose father I'd shot in 1954 during a farm raid. I'd believed I was engaging enemy combatants. He'd been harvesting rice. Why did you kill my father? Santos asked me through a translator. Because I thought I was following orders. Because I believed your father was supporting enemy operations. Because I was trained to see enemies everywhere. I'm sorry. That's inadequate, but it's all I have. Did you enjoy it? The killing? No, I hated it. But I believed it was necessary. I believed I was serving my country. I was wrong. He looked at me for a long time. My father died because Japan trained soldiers to follow orders without thinking. You're as much a victim as he was. I forgive you. I didn't deserve forgiveness. But I accepted it because refusing would have been another form of selfishness. I met with 23 families over 2 weeks. Some forgave me, some didn't. All had suffered because of my actions. The Philippine government formally pardoned me in 1974. President Ferdinand Marcos said he was following orders. He believed he was fighting for his country. That's not criminality, that's tragedy. But legal pardon didn't equal moral absolution. Part 11. The life after he emigrated to Brazil in 1975 couldn't adjust to modern Japan. The pace, the crowds, the constant interviews. I needed space, needed quiet, needed to process 3 decades of isolation, followed by overwhelming attention. I bought a cattle ranch in Mato Grosso do Sul. Raised cattle, lived simply, avoided media when possible. But I also established a nature school, Onoda Shizenjuku, teaching survival skills to young people. Not military tactics, not guerrilla warfare, but self-reliance, nature appreciation, the value of discipline, balanced with wisdom. I married in 1976. My wife, Mashi, was patient with my difficulties adjusting to civilian life, to intimacy, to trusting people. I wrote 2 autobiographies, No Surrender, My 30-Year War, 1974, and Lubang, My Life as a POW, 1999. Tried to explain what those years meant, how loyalty became obsession, how duty became prison. In my second book I wrote, People ask if I'm proud of my 30-year war. I'm not. Pride requires believing you accomplished something valuable. I accomplished nothing except demonstrating that humans can endure absurd suffering when trained to do so. I'm not ashamed either. Shame requires believing you had better options and chose poorly. I didn't have better options. My training, my culture, my orders, they all led inevitably to 30 years in that jungle. What I feel is sadness. Sadness for the time lost, for the people I killed, for the comrades who died beside me, for the family who suffered wondering if I was alive, for Japan, which created a military culture where my actions made sense. If there's a lesson, it's this: question your orders, question your certainty, question the systems that demand unthinking loyalty. Because sometimes the most loyal thing you can do is refuse to follow orders that should never have been given. Part 12. The final Missione died. January 16, 2014, at age 91. Heart failure. In the hospital in Tokyo, surrounded by family. My life spanned incredible changes. Born in 1922, when Japan was a rising empire. Fought in a war that destroyed that empire. Survived 3 decades in a jungle, fighting a war that had ended. Returned to find Japan transformed into an economic superpower. Lived to see the 21st century. To see technology that would have seemed like magic in 1944. At my funeral, Major Taniguchi's grandson read a statement his grandfather had written before his own death in 1979. Onoda was the best and worst of Japanese military culture. The best: loyalty, discipline, endurance, refusal to quit. The worst: inability to question orders. Inability to adapt when circumstances changed. Inability to value life, including his own, above duty. I gave him orders in 1944 that should have included an expiration date. I told him to fight until relieved. I never imagined he'd take that literally for 30 years. That's my failure, not his. If Onoda's story teaches anything, it's that loyalty without wisdom is dangerous. That duty without judgment is slavery. That following orders is virtue only when the orders are righteous. He was a good soldier, which is both his honor and his tragedy. My obituaries in Japanese and international press called me the last Japanese soldier of World War II. Technically accurate, but misleading. I wasn't fighting World War II for 30 years. I was fighting my inability to admit I might be wrong. Fighting my fear that surrender meant betraying everyone who died before me. Fighting the unbearable weight of sunk costs. The longer I stayed, the harder it became to admit it was pointless. The war I fought from 1945 to 1974 wasn't against Filipinos or Americans. It was against doubt, against evidence, against reality itself, and I lost that war. We all did, me, Kazuka, Shimada, Akatsu. We lost the war against our own inability to question what we'd been taught. Epilogue. The lesson my story has been romanticized. I've been called the loyal soldier, the samurai who never surrendered, the embodiment of Japanese honor. That's wrong. I wasn't honorable. I was stubborn. I wasn't loyal. Loyalty requires judgment about what deserves loyalty. I was obedient, which is different. The real lesson of my 30-year war is this: when the evidence overwhelmingly contradicts your beliefs, change your beliefs. I had evidence from 1945 onward that the war was over. Leaflets, newspapers, radio, broadcasts. Family members, search parties, modern technology, changed political situation. I chose to dismiss each piece of evidence individually rather than accept the cumulative weight of all evidence together. That's not loyalty, that's delusion. I killed 30 people because I refused to update my beliefs when reality changed. That's not honor, that's tragedy. If my story has value, it's as a warning. Be loyal to principles, not to orders. Trust evidence, not training. Value human life above institutional preservation. Question everything, especially certainty. Know when to stop fighting, even if stopping feels like surrender. I was taught that surrender was the ultimate shame. But continuing to fight after the war ended, that was the real shame. I surrendered March 9th, 1974. I should have surrendered August 15th, 1945. Those 10,585 days between made me famous. But they also made me a cautionary tale about the danger of loyalty unconstrained. By wisdom, I was the sergeant who refused to surrender. I should have been the sergeant who knew when to stop. Fighting, that's the difference between honor and obsession. I learned it 30 years too late.